welcome! In today's video we're going to be talking about alcohol, why I stopped drinking, and maybe why you should consider doing it too. First of all, let's talk about the drinking culture. So where I live, it's quite normal to binge drink. Going out on the weekends and just getting completely blackout drunk is very normal. It's not just like something that young people do. I think everyone is really engaged in this kind of behavior of just drinking too much. If you are someone who is not drinking, people ask you why, or they might make certain assumptions about you, and sometimes you have an excuse. Not that I think you need one, but you might be like, oh, I'm doing dry January, or I'm doing sober October. But it's the normal thing is to drink. Now, I am an alcoholic. I am nearly 1 year sober, which is amazing. So I'm speaking from a place of I quit drinking because I really had to, because otherwise it was gonna kill me. But I really think that other people can benefit from looking at their relationship with alcohol and maybe seeing that it doesn't serve you in the way that you thought it maybe did at the beginning. This is speaking as an alcoholic, but for me, alcohol at the beginning, it was something great. It worked. It made me feel more confident. It gave me a sense of safety because I was escaping from myself, which we will get onto later. One reason why I think it might be beneficial to quit drinking is that alcohol makes your social anxiety worse. Let me explain. I am someone who is quite uncomfortable around people, especially new people, but even just big groups of people that I know. That's not my natural setting. I don't feel comfortable there, even if they are people that I know and love. I very much like to be by myself. I'm an introvert. I like spending time alone. And so I'm a socially anxious person as well, I would say. I overthink what people are thinking. I say something, I then obsess over that one thing, like, why did you say that? That was so stupid. Or they gave me that funny look. What does that mean? Like, I can get caught up in all of this. Alcohol seemed to be a perfectly good solution to this. It is something that makes you more social. It lowers your inhibitions, right? I'm not gonna get into like the biology of it, but it affects your brain in a big way. It makes you more chatty, makes you just feel at ease. You're suddenly like, oh yeah, I do quite like the world. I'm suddenly like, oh yeah, everyone's my friend. This is a great feeling. The problem is that you're using alcohol and you become reliant on that to feel confident in that situation. So you may think, oh, I'm socially anxious, I need a drink to unwind or make me feel better, just get a bit like looser and feel more social. And that's great, and it will work at first, but you will notice that as time goes on, you feel like you need that drink for any social occasion, because basically what's happening is you're lowering your self-esteem or your ability to cope by constantly needing a drink in a social situation. So then if you have a really good experience, you're like, oh, I met some new people, which is not normal for me because I'm normally quite shy or quite quiet, and I met these people and that was fun. Oh, but I was drinking. You're then gonna think that it was the drink that made you that confident person, when in reality, you can be that person without alcohol. It's just you're not allowing yourself to grow that skill. As I say, I used to drink and I thought it made me more social. Now that I've stopped drinking, I have still made brilliant friends, and we'll talk about that later. I've made those friends without having to have a drink, and I've still been able to meet people, be chatty, be social without alcohol. You end up relying on the alcohol and thinking it's that, and it's lowering your confidence in yourself because you're like, oh yeah, but I only talked to them because I was drunk, or I only talked to them because I'd had a few drinks. But in actual fact, you can talk to those people sober. So alcohol, I think, may be making your social anxiety worse. It certainly was for me, and that's just one reason why I think it would be beneficial for you to stop drinking. I think if you're fond of a drink, you're very familiar with the feeling of hangovers. I don't need to dwell too long on this, but it goes without saying that no drinking, no hangover. I have found this has made me a lot happier. Again, I was an alcoholic. My hangovers were either non-existent because I just start drinking again, or they were absolutely horrific. I'm not going to go into that, that's for another video, which I am planning to do, so if you want to see that, please feel free to subscribe. Even if you don't have a bad hangover, because I remember sometimes, you know, going on a night out with my sister and coming back and the next day waking up and feeling, you know, just a bit like groggy and hungover and sick, but it wasn't awful. And I would spend the afternoon in bed watching like SpongeBob, watching a film that I loved, and I liked having that time. That was quite nice, even though I felt rubbish, but it was nice to have, I guess, an excuse to be like, oh no, I just need to chill. Not that that's a benefit to hangovers, because no, they're just terrible, but I can understand, even if you don't get bad ones, you might be like, well, you know, I have found that I'm so much more productive. You know, I never have to plan for hangovers. I used to talk to friends who they would have to plan their weekend around the fact that they knew they were going to be hungover on the Saturday morning or on the Sunday. I am free as a bird. If someone wants to meet for brunch, if someone last minute wants to meet for coffee, if I decide I want to get up early and go for a walk, I am able to do all of these things because I'm not like crippled by my hangovers anymore. One really powerful thing I've felt in my sobriety since I've stopped drinking alcohol is that I no longer feel shame, guilt, regret, because of things that I've done when I'm drunk. It's, I think, a cultural thing. We think about drunk texting or drunk calling people, waking up and being like, oh my gosh, knowing that feeling of knowing that you said something to someone, being scared to look at your phone because you're like, oh, I can remember saying something, but I don't know what it was. You don't realize how much that weighs on you and like drags you down, because it's just part of what happens if you're drinking alcohol. You know, you get used to it, and if you're drinking a lot and you have those times where you black out or your memory gets a bit fuzzy, it's just normal, and you have that, but then you're carrying around that shame. And say you had an argument with a friend about something stupid, or you sent something that you regret. Because alcohol is lowering your inhibitions, it's meaning that all of these things that you wouldn't normally say or do, or the way that you act, it's going to result in either guilt or shame. And guilt, I think, is a useful emotion. It's an indicator that you're doing something wrong and that maybe you need to shift your behavior away from alcohol. Say if I just snap at someone and then I feel bad about it, I feel guilty, it's like, oh yeah, that was wrong for me to take my anger out on this person, or maybe I should have removed myself from the situation before it got to that point where I just snapped and said something unkind. Guilt, I think, can be useful. Shame, absolutely useless emotion. It will just isolate you, make you feel terrible about yourself, completely destroy your self-esteem. It's just horrible. It's a horrible feeling, and I don't want anyone to feel that, because I felt it for such a long time about the way that I was behaving, and that was so much connected to the way I was drinking. I want to say there is nothing wrong with you if you feel like you have a drinking problem. It's not a moral failing, it's not a choice. I know what it feels like. I know we're talking just in general terms here about stopping drinking alcohol, not necessarily for alcoholics, but if you think that you could have a problem with this, there is help available, and I'm like living proof of this. A year ago, I was literally close to dying, and now I feel so fulfilled in my life. Everything is going way better than I ever could have thought. It's not that everything is great all the time, but it's just I have a life now, and I have a sense of self, which we'll get onto. Please, there is help available for you if you feel like you can't stop your drinking. This leads us on to the next point. Quitting drinking for a little while, even if you just say, I'm not going to drink for the next week or the next month, it might be an interesting thing to do to assess your relationship with alcohol. If you do feel like, I'm not sure, maybe I do have a problem with this, whether that's you start really looking forward to the evening because you know it's socially acceptable then to have a few drinks, or you decide one night not to have a drink and you suddenly feel a bit anxious or a bit jittery, whether that's psychological or physiological. By the end, I had both kind of withdrawal, which was a nightmare, but it can be really helpful to quit drinking for a little while and see how that affects you. Either, as I say, physiologically, do you feel a bit more on edge, a bit more anxious? Does it stop you from sleeping? Do you feel irritable? Do you feel sweaty? These are all signs that maybe your body is physically dependent on alcohol. I'm not a doctor, by the way. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. I'm just speaking from my experience, and these are all things that happen to me. But also, you can be dependent on it psychologically, so you might just be thinking, oh, I'm really missing that drink that I normally have. I normally have a glass of wine with dinner and I'm not having it, and you end up obsessing over it. Not drinking for a little bit, quitting drinking for a while, it can be helpful to reassess your relationship with alcohol, so maybe it's something you could consider doing. I think a lost sense of self can be a massive impact of drinking, and it's one of the things that I have felt has been so beneficial now that I've quit drinking, is that I feel like myself again. I feel like I have a sense of self, and I actually really respect myself in a way that I didn't when I was drinking. Again, speaking from the perspective of an alcoholic. If we're building on what we've talked about already with the shame and the guilt, you can feel, if you're drinking, that it's not necessarily what you want to be doing, it's not serving you, but maybe culturally it's what you feel like you have to do. You want to go out with your friends on the weekend or go out for work drinks. You want to be part of it, and you don't want to have to deal with the question of why you're not drinking. You don't need to give someone your life story when they ask you that. To be honest, I've found as well, I don't know if it's just because most people know my story. No one really cares. They might ask to be curious, but you might come across some people who are then like, oh, go on, like, have one. That's not okay. So then you need to be like, excuse me, no. But generally I find people don't care. And as we said with the social anxiety, in terms of sense of self, I was always hiding behind alcohol. I had no ability to like build my self-esteem, build my confidence from interactions that I was having and things that I was doing, because I was like, well, I was drinking during that, so that wasn't me, that was alcohol. And that's such a missed opportunity, because now I'm doing all these things sober. The last 330 something days this last year, I have not been drinking, so anything that I've been doing, that has come from me, and that has really built my self-esteem, and it's also reconnected me to myself. I've learned how to deal with being angry, how to deal with being sad, irritable, how to deal when you don't know what you're feeling and it just all feels like too much and you feel like you're going to explode. I've learned to deal with this without alcohol, and I've learned how to listen to myself and like listen to my intuition and trust myself. These are all very big things, and I think I'm going to keep making videos on this kind of stuff because there's just so much to say. If you stop drinking, it will really help you connect to yourself again. You won't be caught up in who was that person who had that fight with her friend, like that's not me, but I was drunk. You will be able to step away from that and be like, I am me, this is what I like doing. Maybe you'll discover you don't like those big loud bar situations. Maybe you're still happy to go to a big event where there's loads of people drinking and you're fine and you're happy being yourself. Like, I am awkward, I can be shy and quiet. Alcohol gave me a false self, like a false sense of confidence, and it's not me. I have learned to accept the way that I am. I'm still able to go to these big events. I went to my cousin's wedding when I was 8 months sober. It was a drink heavy atmosphere. Even if not everyone has a wine glass, it's just everywhere, and the way people are acting as well, it's clear that they're getting more and more inebriated, more and more drunk. But I wasn't affected by any of that. I felt in a good place in my sobriety, and I was like, I want to go to this wedding, celebrate my cousin's marriage. I love her, I love my family, I want to be there, and I went there sober and I had a great time, and I did the dancing. I did dancing when I was sober. It is so possible to stop drinking and still feel like you culturally fit in. It is a matter of practice and a matter of believing in yourself, and once you've stopped drinking for a while, you will have built up that confidence in yourself, so you'll be able to do these things that maybe they intimidate you. If you think, I can't like get on a dance floor without having a drink, are you kidding? Speaking for British people, just look at like the wedding that starts, the dancing that starts in the early afternoon, or depend, you know, everyone is like, no, like at the beginning, no, don't want to get on the dance floor now, please. I need a few drinks before I can do that. But you don't at a big event like that, because you know so many people are drinking. They're probably not going to remember it. So you may not be drunk, but you're like, well, these people are. So I can just be silly and crazy and look awkward or whatever, do my dancing, and no one's going to care. They're all drinking. They're all dancing as well. You can still participate in these big things even if you don't drink and still feel like yourself. Now, this is where it gets into a bit dangerous territory, because that in itself feels like a kind of high. And so you have to be careful. If you are an alcoholic, you need to be, or you'll probably be aware of it, but you have to be careful that you're not gaining some kind of vicarious pleasure from being in a really drunken atmosphere. That's something to watch out for. But that's something to talk through with your alcoholic friends, and I will make another video addressing all of this, like alcoholic stuff in detail. This is just a video about drinking in general that I think will help anyone who's assessing their relationship with alcohol. Another fairly obvious reason to stop drinking, like we talked about with the hangovers or the shame, is that drinking is expensive. I certainly had the experience of going on a night out with people and you think that people are going to pay you back, or oh yeah, I'll get this round. They end up not reciprocating and you end up spending £100 on a night out, and you're just like, how did that even happen? Yes, I drank a lot, but I was obviously buying drinks for everyone else. It's expensive, and that's fine if you've worked it into your lifestyle and it's something that you love doing. But you can save the money. You don't need to spend it on alcohol. I know I have had this experience, and I know a lot of other people have had this experience where you think, oh yeah, just one. I'll just go to the pub for one. You end up staying there for 2, 3, 4, then you end up going on a night out which you never planned. It can so quickly just like drain your finances. Again, I'm speaking as an alcoholic, but by the end I was spending £30 a day on alcohol to sustain my habit, and it's just like an extraordinary amount of money that is, and that's definitely on the more extreme end. But if you are going out every weekend, it's probably adding up, and you probably have noticed it. And not only with the alcohol, but with the fact that alcohol lowers your inhibitions, you'll probably notice that you start buying things impulsively because your impulse control is going along with the alcohol. That's another one of the effects. We're not going to talk about that, which is why when you have one, you can't just have one, or you end up, well, as an alcoholic, I definitely can't just have one. Anyone is more likely to, oh yeah, I'll just have one, but then you have the one and it's already starting to work and you think, oh yeah, I'll have more, yeah, I'll stay. But also, you can end up then buying stuff online that you don't remember buying, and something turns up and you're like, what? Or you remember it and you're like, why did I spend that much money on that? Or why did I get that takeaway or go to McDonald's at like 4 in the morning? Like, this is all added cost. If you're getting a taxi home, that's gonna cost money. All of this stuff, it's not just the alcohol, it's the whole experience around a night out. Even if you're staying home, like I would drink at home and I would still find myself ordering food in or going and buying £20 worth of like crisps and chocolate and stuff. Like, it wouldn't be something that I would normally buy if I hadn't been drinking, and if the drink hadn't made me think, oh yeah, I just need some crisps. It's expensive and it all adds up. I don't think we need to go too much into the dangers of alcohol. I think that's probably something that you're very aware of, whether it's the government guidelines of only drinking a certain amount of units every week. I think the guidelines are 14 for men, 12 for women. It's very small. I mean, when I was drinking, I was probably drinking 30 units a day, definitely in the 20s of units every single day. An obscene amount. It scares me to remember how bad it was. We know the health risks. It increases your risk of high blood pressure, problems with your heart. If you have had a heavy night out, you may have experienced suddenly waking up in the night or waking up in the next morning and your heart just going and going. Like, alcohol is not good. We know it's bad for your liver. It has all sorts of impacts on your body as well as on your brain, and as we've talked about, on your self-esteem. It has these physical risks, and we're going to talk about the effects it has on your mental health. Aside from the physical danger it poses to your actual body, it can make you put yourself in dangerous situations and in really unsafe situations, whether it's you decide to walk home by yourself at 3 in the morning because you're like, oh, it's fine because you've had a few drinks. Sober you would be like, what are you doing? Don't do that. That's a dangerous situation. And there's all sorts of other examples which I'm sure you can think of as well from your own past and from your own experiences with alcohol. You look back on some of these things and you're like, wow, I was lucky there that nothing bad happened. It will put you in dangerous situations. Now let's talk about the mental health aspect. We talked a bit about the way that it affects your body, but alcohol is a depressant, and you may also have heard about anxiety, which is like that feeling of increased anxiousness caused by drinking, which you experience in your hangover. Hence, I talked about your heart beating out of your chest. That can send a signal to your brain that you're like, what? Oh, something's happened. Like, I'm feeling anxious. Why? Like, it will put you in a heightened state of anxiety. And I definitely found this. And also, it's a depressant. So it is going to make you cry. It's going to make you sad. It's going to make you more emotional. Yes, you can have like a brilliant night out, but how many night outs have you had that ended in fights or in tears of some kind, either you or your friends? I'm willing to bet it's at least 5. Like, it's pretty common. Aside from like in the moment the effect that it's having, long term it's also going to depress you. I remember going to the GP and being like, I'm so depressed, maybe I should try antidepressants. I was very honest with my GP about my drinking. They were like, we can't prescribe you this because you may not actually need it, because alcohol is a depressant, so that could be what's bringing your mood down. You need to address your drinking first. We'll get into that in another video. But they were right. I have not needed to take antidepressants this past year. That's not to say that my mood has always been amazing and I've been feeling great, but I'm definitely not in the same depressed state that I was when I was continuously drinking. Even if you're not drinking every day or even every weekend, it might be helpful to assess the impact that alcohol is having on your mental health, as well as all of the other things that we've discussed so far. I would say one benefit to quitting drinking is that I have felt that I have built real connections with people because I am sober, I am present, I am in the moment, I am not acting out of a false sense of bravado brought on by alcohol. I am just being me, and I have been able to make new friends, and I've been able to make sober friends. So they are also sober, also alcoholics or addicts. But it's been so nice, and I had a really interesting experience a few months ago where I went round to a fellow alcoholic's house and we had the best evening, like so much laughter. It made my soul so happy. She made a lovely dinner and we just sat and we were just chatting for like 3 hours. It was so amazing. And the really interesting thing was I was journaling about this experience afterwards because I was like, I'm feeling so grateful. I had this lovely evening with my friend and it was so nice. But I realized that in my memory, there were 2 glasses of wine on the table. And I was like, well, obviously that's not true. She's an alcoholic, as am I. We're both sober. She's 6 months ahead of me. So we've been sober for a substantial amount of time in early recovery. I was like, wow, that's so interesting. Why has my memory placed wine on the table? And I realized it was because the energy that we had and like the evening that we had, it was so free and so joyful, as I said, full of laughter, and that feeling was what I used to get from alcohol at the beginning before it stopped working. So I had in my head almost placed the alcohol there because I was like, oh, that was the reason why we had such a lovely time, because we were both so like free and just laughing and joking about stuff. But it's like, no, that was a beautiful evening that was just 2 sober people in recovery talking about their lives, talking about recovery, spending time together. There was no alcohol. That was a real connection, not only with new people that I've met, but it's also strengthened my current relationships because I'm actually present and I'm actually able to remember things. Before, I had no memory of anything because I was just drinking all the time. It was taking away my memory. Another really bad effect. We talked a bit about blackouts, but now I'm present and I can be there for people, and it's just so amazing. We have talked about a lot in this video. My gosh, is it gonna end up being like 20 minutes long? I hope this has made you reassess your relationship with alcohol, if it's something that you are struggling with, or even if it's just something that's a very regular part of your life but you've not stopped to think the ways that it might be affecting you. And I think maybe trying an experiment of stopping drinking for a while, you might learn some really interesting things about yourself, so maybe you should give it a go. If this has spoken to you in any way in terms of your addiction, please, as I've said earlier, you are not alone. Please get help. There is help available. I am living proof that there is help available. I cannot believe the better headspace that I'm in, and you can get help. There are other people who feel exactly the same as you. You're not alone, and they are very easy to find. I will leave a link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. God bless, and I will see you in the next one.